The Kryll hegemony moved as one. Their warships, sleek obsidian blades against the diamond dust of space, advanced in formations so perfect, so geometrically precise. They seemed less like vessels crewed by living beings and more like the unthinking components of some vast, cosmic machine. Recently, the human defenses at the Cygnus Crossway had learned this to their sorrow. A static shield wall, a textbook defensive line, crushed, outmaneuvered, and annihilated with an efficiency that was both terrifying and, to the Kryll, deeply satisfying. Aboard the Kryll flagship Dominator, a vessel easily 10 times the size of any human dreadnought, Supreme Tactician Xyler observed the silent, majestic advance of his armada. His multifaceted eyes scanned the holographic display before him, a three-dimensional representation of Kepler's belt, a treacherous region of asteroids, nebulae, and gravitational anomalies. It was the next critical human defensive chokepoint, and Xylo's meticulously crafted master plan accounted for every particle of dust, every flicker of radiation. Kryll military doctrine was absolute, unchanging, and proven through centuries of conquest. Orders flowed from high command, and in this theater, from Xylo himself, down a rigid, unwavering chain. Each ship commander, each squadron leader knew their designated role, their precise vector, their exact firing solution for any given contingency outlined in the voluminous Kryll tactical manuals. Individual initiative was not just discouraged, it was considered a symptom of systemic failure, a flaw in the perfect design, punishable by immediate re-education or, for repeat offenses, disintegration. There was no room for deviation. There was only the plan. Miles away, on the bridge of the human flagship HFS Vanguard, Admiral Marcus Thorne, a man whose weathered face was a roadmap of past campaigns, addressed his subordinate commanders. The air in the briefing room was thick with tension. They all knew what had happened at Cygnus. They knew the Kryll's reputation. Thorne, however, was not a man who bowed to reputation. He was known for his unorthodox thinking, for pulling victories from situations most would deem hopeless. His orders for the defense of Kepler's belt were shockingly, almost insultingly, brief. He tapped the holographic display showing the sprawling, chaotic expanse of the belt. The objective, ladies and gentlemen, is to hold Kepler's belt, deny the Kryll passage through these narrows. He paused, his gaze sweeping over their expectant faces. How you achieve that objective is up to your judgment on the field. Use the terrain, use your wits, surprise them. A rare, almost predatory glint appeared in his eyes. Surprise me. A ripple of astonishment, quickly suppressed, went through the assembled commanders. This wasn't just granting leeway. This was tearing up the rulebook. Standard fleet doctrine called for coordinated lines, interlocking fields of fire, strict adherence to command directives. Thorne was telling them to improvise, to think for themselves, to fight like individuals united by a common purpose rather than cogs in a machine. It was either madness or exactly what humanity needed to face the unbreakable formations of the Kryll. The Kryll Armada, thousands of obsidian warships ranging from nimble scout drones to colossal dreadnoughts, surged into Kepler's belt. Their formations were, as always, immaculate. They moved like a perfectly choreographed ballet of destruction, sensor sweeps precise, weapon systems charged, every vessel occupying its preordained position in Supreme Tactician Xylo's grand design. Xylo himself, aboard the Dominator, watched his projections unfold with a serene confidence. The humans would form a predictable defensive line at the belt's narrowest point, just as their doctrine dictated. They would be crushed, just as before. But Kepler's belt did not greet the Kryll with a static wall of human warships. Instead, the first anomaly, as Xylo's dispassionate internal monologue termed it, occurred in Sector Gamma 7, a dense cluster of irregular, iron-rich asteroids. A squadron of 12 human destroyers, Colsane Harriers, led by the audacious commander Anya Sharma, was assigned to this sector. As the Kryll Vanguard wing, 50 sleek, heavily armed cruisers approached their position, the Harriers didn't engage. They didn't even hold their ground. To the utter bafflement of the Kryll wing commander, the human destroyers turned tail and executed what appeared to be a panicked, disorganized retreat, engines flaring erratically as they plunged deeper into the densest part of the asteroid cluster. The Kryll cruiser commander, Vrel, registered the human maneuver with contempt. Predictable cowardice, Vrel communicated to his squadron. They break under pressure, pursue and eliminate, maintain formation. The Kryll cruisers, eager for an easy kill, followed, their superior numbers and firepower making them confident. This maneuver by Sharma was a direct violation of standard human fleet doctrine. Destroyers were not skirmishers meant for such risky hit-and-fade tactics in confined terrain, especially against superior numbers. They were supposed to support the main battle line, screen capital ships, or engage targets of opportunity within a structured fleet action. What Sharma was doing was reckless, almost suicidal. But it was exactly what Admiral Thorne had implicitly encouraged. Once deep within the labyrinthine asteroid field, where the Krill's perfect formations became a liability, hindering maneuverability and clear fields of fire, Sharma's Harriers didn't scatter randomly. They executed a pre-planned dispersal pattern, using the massive, irregularly shaped asteroids for cover. Their targeting sensors, more nimble than the Krill's larger systems in such cluttered space, locked onto vulnerabilities. Harrier lead to all units. Sharma's voice crackled over their squadron comms, calm despite the G-forces pressing her into her seat. Target engines and sensor arrays. Disable, don't destroy unless necessary. Let's give these tin cans a headache they won't forget. Dance with them, Harriers. Make them dizzy. The human destroyers, painted in mottled camouflage that blended with the dark asteroids, darted out from behind their cover, unleashed volleys of precision laser fire or short-range torpedoes at the exposed engine nacelles and vulnerable sensor globes of the Kryll cruisers, then vanished again before the Kryll could bring their heavier forward batteries to bear. The perfect Kryll formation began to falter. Individual Kryll cruisers, frustrated by the elusive targets, broke formation to try and engage the darting human ships, only to find themselves isolated, their flanks exposed, or their shots impacting harmlessly against solid rock. Communications within the Kryll wing became increasingly frantic as they reported multiple, uncoordinated, illogical attacks. Aboard the Dominator, Supreme Tactician Xyler observed the disruption in Sector Gamma 7 on his main holographic display. A tiny red blip indicated the Harriers, their movements erratic and unpredictable. He noted the inefficient expenditure of resources by the human destroyers and the suboptimal tactical response of Vrel's cruisers in breaking formation. He dismissed it, a minor, localized act of desperation by an outmatched and poorly disciplined foe. The grand plan remained intact. The humans would soon exhaust their foolish tricks. He made a minute adjustment to a reinforcement vector, confident that this small pocket of chaos would soon be smothered by the overwhelming, logical might of the hegemony. While Commander Sharma's Harriers were playing their deadly game of hide-and-seek in the asteroid fields of Sector Gamma 7, a different kind of deviation from Kryll expectations was unfolding elsewhere in the sprawling, chaotic battle for Kepler's belt. The human-heavy cruiser HFS Dauntless, under the command of the cool-headed Captain Jian Li, found itself in a precarious situation. The Dauntless had been tasked with providing fire support to a carrier group near the belt's northern edge. During a particularly fierce exchange with a Kryll battlecruiser squadron, a concentrated burst of Kryll electronic warfare had fried their primary long-range communications array. They were effectively deaf to Admiral Thorne's fleet-wide commands and blind to the larger strategic picture. Standard human fleet procedure in such a scenario was clear. Disengage from immediate threats if possible, proceed to a pre-designated emergency regroup point, and attempt to re-establish communications. The Kryll, with their intimate knowledge of human doctrine, gleaned from countless previous victories and meticulous study, would fully expect the Dauntless to do just that. It was the logical, predictable course of action. But Captain Lee was a student of Admiral Thorne's less conventional philosophies. He gathered his key bridge officers in the dim, emergency-lit auxiliary bridge. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Lee said, his voice calm despite the sparks still occasionally showering from a damaged overhead conduit. It appears High Command has temporarily misplaced us. Suggestions. His tactical NCO, Sergeant Rex Hex Holloway, a lanky noncom with a reputation for seeing patterns others missed, leaned over a local sensor repeater screen. Its display was a mess of Kryll energy signatures and ECM ghost signals, but Hex's eyes were sharp. Sir, Hex said, tapping a flickering icon on the screen. Local sensors are picking up something interesting. Through that sensor shadow near the Triton ice moon, multiple low-power signatures moving slowly. Not warships, I think, too sluggish. Could be a Kryll logistics convoy. A supply convoy, the lifeblood of any fleet, lightly defended, usually routed through supposedly secure channels, and utterly vital. Crippling it wouldn't win the battle outright, but it would certainly throw a wrench in the Krill's meticulously planned offensive. This was where creative insubordination, as some wryly called it, came into play. Captain Lee looked at his officers. Their faces were grim, but there was a spark of anticipation in their eyes. Thorne's brief was hold the belt, deny them passage. Waiting at a regroup point served neither of those directly. High Command wants us to hold the belt and deny them passage, Lee stated, echoing Thorne's words and his own thoughts. Crippling their resupply capabilities in this sector serves that objective far better than sitting idle and waiting for a phone call. Helm, set a course for the Triton Shadow. Tactical, prepare for anti-freighter operations. Let's go give their quartermasters a surprise. The crew of the Dauntless, trained for years in rigid adherence to protocol, responded with an almost palpable sense of liberation. They rapidly adapted to their new, self-assigned mission. Engineers bypassed damaged systems. Weapon crews recalibrated targeting solutions for slower, less maneuverable targets. And the helm officer plotted an intercept course that used the gravitational distortions around the ice moon to mask their approach. The Kryll support convoy, half a dozen massive replenishment carriers and heavily laden repair tenders, escorted by only a handful of surprised and outgunned Kryll frigates, never saw the Dauntless coming. The human heavy cruiser, appearing suddenly from the sensor shadow, tore into them with a ferocity born of desperation and newfound purpose. Its heavy cannons crippled the slow-moving carriers, while its point defense systems shredded the surprised frigate escorts that tried to intervene. Aboard the Dominator, Supreme Tactician Xylo received the garbled, panicked reports of the attack on logistics convoy Sigma 9. Another red alert bloomed on his immaculate tactical display in a sector he had deemed secure. He frowned, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. This was not just illogical, it was uncoordinated. The attack on the convoy was too far from the main human engagements to be part of any recognizable, centrally directed strategy. Why were these humans not adhering to established combat doctrines? Why were they acting like individuals? The very concept was alien to his rigidly structured mind. He struggled to incorporate this new, baffling data point into his perfect plan. His plan, which had always accounted for every variable, was beginning to show cracks under the weight of human unpredictability. The anomalies continued to multiply across the vast, three-dimensional battlefield of Kepler's Belt. It wasn't just Commander Sharma's hit-and-run destroyers or Captain Lee's rogue convoy raid. Dozens of similar incidents, born of desperation, ingenuity, and Admiral Thorne's deliberately vague orders, began to paint a picture of bewildering, emergent strategy. A squadron of human light frigates, Coulson Jackals, found themselves cut off from their carrier group, the HFS Intrepid, after it sustained heavy damage, and was forced to make an emergency FTL jump out of the immediate combat zone. Presumed lost by both human and Kryll command, the Jackals, under Lieutenant Commander Eva Rostova, no relation to the captain from another tale, but sharing a similar tenacity, were low on fuel and ordnance. Standard procedure dictated attempting to evade and escape. Rostova had a different idea. Those asteroids, Rostova mused to her desperate bridge crew, pointing to a particularly dense belt of small, fast-moving rocks, are like a natural minefield. What if we help them along? Using the last of their maneuvering thruster fuel, the Jackals carefully navigated into the denser sections of the asteroid belt. Their technical crews, working with frantic haste, jury-rigged their remaining concussion missiles. They disabled the primary guidance systems and instead linked the detonation triggers to their proximity sensors, recalibrating them to react to the unique energy signature and density of Kryll warship hulls, while ignoring the smaller, colder asteroids. They then seeded these improvised, shifting mines along a narrow channel the Kryll were likely to use as an approach vector, based on recently intercepted and quickly translated Kryll navigational chatter. Hours later, a squadron of Kryll heavy destroyers, expecting clear space as per their long-range scans, blundered straight into the Jackal's deadly, invisible trap. Explosions blossomed in the void where Kryll precision was met by human desperation. Meanwhile, a wing of human interceptor fighters, Coulson Wildcats, their carrier also heavily damaged and limping towards a repair station, found themselves stranded. With critically low fuel, their wing commander, Major Macmillan, made a daring decision. An emergency landing on a civilian asteroid mining station, Xylos Station, a common name for such outposts, it seemed. The station's grizzled foreman, a retired Navy engineer named Chief Petty Officer Henderson, and his crew of resourceful civilian miners didn't hesitate. While some refueled the Wildcats from the station's own reserves, Henderson and his team, with a gleam in their eyes, helped the pilots rearm their fighters. They didn't have military-grade ordnance, but they had industrial plasma cutters, survey charges used for blasting rock, and a deep-seated resentment for the Kryll. Modified on the fly, these improvised weapons weren't powerful enough to take down a Kryll cruiser, but they proved surprisingly effective against the lightly armored, unshielded Kryll fighter drones when launched in sudden, close-quarters ambushes from the station's mining tunnels and hangar bays. The Kryll, expecting only civilian targets, found themselves swarmed by ghost fighters appearing from nowhere. Aboard the HFS Vanguard, Admiral Marcus Thorne monitored the unfolding, beautiful chaos with a calm that unnerved his bridge crew. He wasn't issuing a flood of new orders, not micromanaging his scattered forces. Instead, he was more like a conductor guiding a vast, improvisational jazz orchestra. He'd set the theme, "Hold Kepler's Belt," and now he listened, occasionally nudging a section, redirecting a supporting harmony, a fire support request here, an intelligence update there, but mostly allowing his musicians to play their own inspired solos. His calm channels, which should have been a model of military brevity, were a bewildering flood of concise reports of localized actions, urgent requests for fire support on targets of opportunity that hadn't existed minutes before, and declarations of independent tactical adjustments. It was a communications officer's nightmare, but for Thorne, it was the sound of humanity adapting, innovating, and fighting. Supreme Tactician Xyla, on the Dominator, was experiencing the opposite. His bridge was a place of growing agitation. He stared at his holographic display, which was no longer a pristine model of predictable conflict, but a blooming, spreading rash of red alerts and contradictory sensor readings. He kept trying to identify the overarching human master plan, the central strategic thrust he could counter with his logical, overwhelming force. He issued new, complex orders to his fleet commanders, designed to adapt to these scattered human efforts. But the Kryll command hierarchy, so efficient in executing a preset plan, was proving catastrophically slow in reacting to a fluid, unpredictable battlefield. Orders were often irrelevant by the time they filtered down to the ship commanders on the front lines, as the human threats had already shifted, adapted, or vanished, only to reappear elsewhere, causing fresh havoc. His perfect structure was becoming a crippling bottleneck, strangling his ability to respond. The relentless, multi-pronged assault of human initiative began to take its toll. It wasn't one decisive blow, but a death by 1,000 cuts, each cut delivered by an independent, adaptive human unit exploiting a temporary Kryll weakness. The Kryll Armada, built for monolithic, predictable warfare, was being systematically dismantled by an enemy that refused to fight by any recognizable rules. Kryll supply lines, harassed by opportunistic raiders like Captain Lee's Dauntless and other, smaller hunter-killer groups that had taken similar initiative, began to falter. Ships on the front lines reported dwindling ammunition and fuel reserves. The perfect Kryll formations, designed for overwhelming broadsides against a concentrated foe, found themselves constantly harried by hit-and-run attacks from elusive destroyers like Commander Sharma's Harriers. They were ambushed by improvised minefields laid by lost squadrons like Rostova's Jackals, and pecked at by Ghost, fighters operating from unexpected civilian outposts. Kryll vanguard ships, pushing forward to engage the anticipated human battle line, found themselves instead isolated, their flanks exposed, swarmed from multiple, unexpected vectors by human units that appeared, struck, and vanished before Kryll reinforcements could react. Aboard the Dominator, Supreme Tactician Xylo's serene confidence had completely evaporated. His multifaceted eyes stared in horrified disbelief at his tactical display, now a chaotic mess of red alerts, broken formation icons, and contradictory sensor reports. His meticulously crafted plan, the culmination of generations of Kryll strategic thought, was unraveling before his very eyes. A horrifying, alien understanding began to dawn on his rigid, logical mind. There was no single, grand human strategy for him to counter. Their strategy was this chaos, this cacophony of individual initiative, this emergent effectiveness born from countless small units making smart, localized decisions, often bending or outright breaking established rules to achieve immediate, tangible results. The Kryll military machine, a marvel of centralized control and flawless execution against a predictable enemy, was utterly paralyzed by an enemy that presented 1,000 different threats from 1,000 different directions, all at once, all adapting in real time. His ship commanders, conditioned for centuries to await explicit orders and terrified of making an unapproved decision in such an unprecedented and unpredicted scenario, hesitated. In the fluid, brutal calculus of space combat, that hesitation was fatal. Human ships, free to act on their own cognizance, exploited every moment of Kryll indecision, every gap in their fragmenting lines. Admiral Marcus Thorne, on the bridge of the HFS Vanguard, saw the critical moment arrive. The Kryll lines were not just wavering, they were breaking. Entire Kryll squadrons were attempting to disengage, their movements no longer coordinated but indicative of localized panic. He leaned forward, a rare, almost imperceptible smile touching his lips. He keyed the fleet-wide broadcast. His voice was calm, devoid of triumph, yet carrying the weight of impending victory. All HFS units, Thorne broadcast, his voice cutting through the vibrant, noisy chatter on the command net. General advance. Press the advantage. Kepler's belt is ours. The human fleet, a collection of independently operating but synergistically effective battle groups, squadrons, and even lone ships, surged forward. There was no grand, sweeping maneuver, but a unified, opportunistic push into the collapsing Kryll front. The remaining Kryll ships, their command structure overwhelmed, their tactical doctrine utterly shattered, their belief in their own invincibility broken, began a disorganized, chaotic retreat from Kepler's belt. Some fought on despairingly, only to be quickly overwhelmed. Most simply tried to flee the illogical madness of the human defense. Thorne leaned back in his command chair, the cacophony on the comms now a symphony to his ears. Reports of localized victories, ingenious ad hoc solutions, daring maneuvers that would make a doctrine-bound tactician tear their hair out. He looked at his astonished, elated bridge crew. "That," he muttered, the smile finally reaching his eyes, "is how humanity fights. That is how humanity wins." The Kryll had come expecting a predictable tune, a battle hymn played by the book. Instead, they had faced the roaring, improvisational, and ultimately unbeatable jazz of human ingenuity and the indomitable spirit of individuals trusted to think for themselves.